Hi, welcome to the HEI OpenAthens NHS support group for admins and HEI librarians alike. My name's Isla Kuhn, I'm co-chair of UHMLG, and I'm also an NHS OpenAthens admin. So very pleased to be able to take on that role for both my students and also for the trust that I support. I'm delighted to have Fran, Wilkie and Alan Fricker with us this morning. Fran will be focusing on the admin side for NHS HEI OpenAthens, and Alan will be talking about the resources a little bit later on. But we're recording the session. We're going to be asking you to put all your questions to the end, put them in chat, store them all up. We'll give plenty of space for answering those, but hopefully a lot of the presentation will do that job for us. So without further ado, welcome all, welcome particularly Fran and Alan, and I'm going to pass over to you, Fran, to tell us all about NHS HEI OpenAthens, the admin support side of things. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Brilliant, thanks Isla. Hi everybody, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Fran Wilkie. I have for the last year worked for Health Education England, which is now NHS England. Previous to that I worked at NICE for a very long time and was the National OpenAthens Administrator at NICE. And somehow with the move to NHS England I still have some responsibility for OpenAthens, which is why you still get me coming to talk to you about it. So what I'm going to do is just run through some of the kind of basic things that you as an OpenAthens HEI NHS administrator might need to do, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have as you go along. So I'm going to do a bit of a live demo, but I can put some slides together for afterwards if that would be helpful. Hopefully, as you know, students are able to have OpenAthens accounts in kind of two ways. So if there's a student on a placement within a university trust, they can have an account under the trust placement. But also all of you who are on this call who've part of the NHS HEI scheme have the ability to create accounts for students for the duration of their course. One of our eligibility criteria is that the courses that involve a substantial placement in the NHS, they're able to have an OpenAthens account for the duration of their course, which means they can see the resources that they'll have access to when they move into the NHS, access things like e-learning for healthcare, which we can talk about later on, and a range of other resources that they can have as they go through. So I'm just going to share my screen, and here I am on the OpenAthens admin page, which
perfect. Yeah,
Isla's nodded, so that's all good. So I'm logged in here at the top level. So this is the level that Isla sees when she logs into OpenAthens to do any admin stuff for you. And below that, then we have 60 odd organisations that are part of this scheme. So we can go in and have a look at all of them from within there. This bit here is showing administrators for each of those organisations, and I know there's been a couple of questions about administrators. So the process for creating administrators changed a little while ago. It used to be that there was one admin login per institution, and if you had more than one person doing the OpenAthens work, they needed to share that login, and that's not good practice, not great for auditing purposes, so seeing who's done what and whether you need to have a conversation with somebody about things that have been done. So OpenAthens changed their admin authentication system, so you can now have as many administrators for your organization as you need. And you actually, once there's one administrator account set up for an organization, any admin in that organization can create more admin accounts. So I'm just going to run through how to do that. Your admin account should now, they didn't when it was first set up, but you can have a personal account. So like you can have an administrator account that you can access the resources with as well. It used to be that the admin accounts you couldn't access resources, but admin accounts now do access resources. But you do have a problem in that if you then try and log in on the OpenAthens NICE pages to get into the portal, your admin account won't let you log in on this page. So what we recommend still is that you have a personal account and then also have an administrator account. And it's quite easy to do. I've got one set up here. So this is a personal account. You see it sitting on this personal tab here, and it's one that I set up the other day. So there's an account for me sitting at this level, and so you could create an account for whoever it is that needs one of your colleagues. If they need an account, you just go in and create them an account, and you do that using this create account wizard that steps through. You type in, choose a username. It sets it up automatically for a couple of years. You can either specify a password if you're creating it for yourself, or you can send an activation email to the user so that they can then set up the password for themselves. And the wizard takes you through and creates an account. And once you've got that account, you then have to promote it to an admin account. And you do that from the preferences tab and then organization. And on here, you then see the information that's about the organization. But there's also a couple of other tabs. So the administrator tab is here. And what you do is you go in and you search for the account you want to promote. Here's my test one. And then you click add role. You have to, even though there's only one choice, you have to click on it. Otherwise it doesn't enable this little add button. You click add, and then the last step is to click save changes. Because if you don't save the changes, it just navigates away and loses that there. But you can see changes have been saved. So now this Fran Wilkie test account is set up as an administrator account. And if I go back to the dashboard and have a look at the accounts, I'm no longer on that personal tab, but I've moved on to the administrator tab here, and there's that account. So you can set those up for any additional colleagues who need an account. If you get stuck, drop us a message to the service desk and we can help you with that. But it is possible for you to set those up for yourselves. The other question I've been asked is how you get rid of them. So if people leave or move on and you need to delete those accounts, you can either, if they're moving on to another role within the university and they're not using the OpenAthens administrator or whatever, you can just click on the little cross and it takes that away. And again, click on save changes. Or you can just go in and delete an account. So once you're in an account, sitting on here, you can click on the little delete button and then delete that account out of the system. So hopefully that's just a quick reminder about admin accounts and how you can get in and out of them. The other thing I wanted to do was just give you again a quick overview of what you see when you land on this page, and I'm just going to change very quickly and go into Isla's University, because there were a couple of extra buttons that were showing that I don't have on the previous one. So when you log in and you end up on your institution's administration page, you have this little overview. So there's the buttons here that enable you to look at different bits. You get the most popular resources that your university members of your organisation have tried transferring to. Doesn't necessarily mean they've actually authenticated successfully, because what OpenAthens does is it counts and tracks transfers from one into another resource. But these are the ones that members of Cambridge University have been trying to access. You have this bit here that gives you a little summary of activity. So there's been 2 accounts created, 1 user left, and 73 different people have tried to log in the past 30 days. It shows you that a kind of little audit trail of activity. So this was a test account that I added in the course of me doing some other work. Isla's added other accounts within here, so you can have a little audit trail of what's been going on with your organisation. This is where you get your join requests. Now you may or may not see requests for joining. If you work solely on allowing users to you create the bulk upload of accounts, you wouldn't see any join requests. A couple of universities have asked if they can have people self-register, and if people are going to self-register, you'll see the join requests flagged up here, and you can then just click onto those in order to be able to go and approve them or reject them. You also get little flags about accounts that are due to expire, so you might, if you can have a look at those and see whether it's people that need extending or accounts that have expired, and go in and delete those. They do delete automatically after a certain amount of time that's set at the top level, but you might want to do some housekeeping and tidy those up if you need to. So that's kind of a just overview of what you see from within here. The other bits you might want to go and use are your accounts page. So you click on this and it shows you all the different accounts that you have set up within there, whether they're active. You can change the amount of information you see on that page. So this little button here, that's the show hide columns. If you click on that, you can choose to put in department or their title. Just click on set columns, and it adds those bits of information and those columns into there for you. So you can set what you see from within there. You can choose to set them as default if that's how you like to work. You can see more or fewer accounts at a time, and you can move along them using these buttons. The other thing you can do is select accounts. So this little button here allows you to select all of those shown. So that's those just on this page, or all the accounts all together. Or you can individually select them using the buttons here. And once you've got some accounts selected, you get this actions button. So again, you can do bulk things. So you can, delete a number of accounts in one go. Excuse me, you can change the details. You can email them if you want to send some information to a group of users. Once you click on the email users, it pulls up their accounts, their email addresses here, and you just, as it says, right click and copy and paste those into your email clients. Just a couple of words of warning about emailing. Our T's and C's that people have agreed to say that you can use their personal details only to let them know about OpenAthens related things. So you can send them an email or some information about training sessions you're doing using their NHS OpenAthens, or about resources that they can access using their NHS OpenAthens, but you couldn't use it to do general library promotion stuff about things that aren't OpenAthens specific. But you do have the option to be able to use the system to highlight and send some emails out to people from within there. So I hope that makes sense. Just a quick reminder of what you can see. The other thing that you can see from the dashboard is the resources that are allocated to your organisation. And when Isla and I set up new universities, we try and make sure that you have these kind of core resources allocated, so that if a user logs in here, I'm just going to log myself in, you can then see the list of resources, and they can click and access to go out to those resources. So there's that's what's selected in here is what's reflected on that list of my resources when they go and log in and have a look at their account details. If you think yours are set up wrongly, again, give us a shout and I can go in and have a look and make sure you've got the right things set within there. So that's everything on the dashboard. So as I mentioned, you do have the ability to create individual accounts, which you might do if you've got, a new joiner or, somebody as a one-off. But generally, the way that all of you who are part of this kind of NHS HEI agreement would do bulk uploads of accounts for cohorts of students at a time, and you might do that once a year. You might do it a couple of times through the year, depending on how your courses run. And you do that from using this accounts menu at the top. Accounts menu, and then you have the bulk upload option, and there's two bits here. There's the submit option, which I'll come back to, but there's the bulk template. So if you have used the template in the past, you will need to re-download it, because OpenAthens have made a couple of changes to it. They discovered an issue with how accounts were sitting in the system, which meant there were a couple of duplicated account things, which meant that they had to amend a couple of columns of things, and they've had to do the bulk template as well. So just if you've got a previous version of it, you'll just need to click and download it again before you upload any new students this autumn. Once you get the template, it comes as a Excel file, so a .xls file. You will need to save it as a .cvs file, so it will only allow you to upload it as a CVS file. As you click along the headers of the rows, it gives you a little bit of information about what that field is, and it will tell you if it's mandatory or not. So if you don't fill those in, it tells you what it will put in for you as you do the upload. So this field's not mandatory, and it will default to false. If you don't put an expiry date in, it will set it under the preferences, which is a 2-year thing. Whereas if you have students on a 3 or 4 year course, you can put in an expiry date that corresponds to that. So you fill in the details of it and save that file as a CVS file, and then you come back into the OpenAthens admin, you do accounts, bulk upload, and then submit. CSV format, as I said, and you need to make sure if you're adding accounts, it's this one. If you've got a bunch of accounts that you need to amend the details of, the template, the first tab is you're adding one, the second one is for modifying accounts, and the third one is for deleting accounts. So you fill in whichever version of that you need, and then when you come and do the upload, you select which version you want. It's a tricky thing. It doesn't always work first time. I don't do it very often. Isla's done it much more often than I have, and she encounters problems with it every now and then. Generally persevering with it, because if it fails, it will try and tell you why it's failed and where the problem is. If it fails, generally making a couple of tweaks and uploading it again works. But again, if you're stuck with it at any point, you can contact us. There's a couple of ways of contacting, which we'll come back to at the end. But it does mean that you not having to create individual accounts for hundreds of students at a time, which is the benefit of it for you. So that's the bulk upload. The other thing we get asked about is about moving accounts. So sometimes if a student goes on a placement into a trust, you might get a request to move an account from your university organisation into a trust organisation, and generally the advice is still not to do that. It gets a bit messy, and people forget to move their accounts back again, and then their account's in the wrong place and they're trying to access stuff that they're not actually eligible for. So generally the advice is you have your HEI account, which they can keep for the duration. And if they are on placement and they're being encouraged to look at things that are trust buys that's different to the content they can get from your HEI account, which only gives you access to the national resources, which Alan will talk about more in some more details shortly, that they create a second account. They can have more than one account in the system. They can even have more than one account in the system with the same email address, as long as on their account this button isn't ticked. So log in by email address. If that button's ticked, what it means is that they don't need to remember their username. They could just put their email address in and the password when they go and log in. But if they want to have more than one account with the same email address, you need to make sure that that button isn't ticked in there. So often students will have two accounts, one that's set up as a temporary account when they're on placement, as well as the one that you create for them here. Some of the other common things that you might be asked to do is when students get stuck with passwords and password resets. And again, if you open up, you navigate in and use the search to find an account. And then once you're on account, you can get a number of options for password resets. What we recommend is you go to actions and generate activation code. That then sends them an email with a link in that they can click in and go and reset the password themselves. Occasionally people struggle doing that, so you can manually reset a password here. But if you do that, obviously that's not the most secure thing to do. So we would suggest that you tell them that you've reset it, but give them the details of how they can go in and reset the password themselves again. And that's here on the NICE website. So they put their email address in and it comes up with the option to choose a password. Just a note, in case you've not seen, OpenAthens about a year ago now did change their maybe not quite a year ago, they changed their criteria for setting up passwords. So they've made it be more strict, in line with industry standards. And so they give these suggestions about, picking random words. You can use uppercase numbers, symbols, but they're not required. You can't include the account username. And as you put a password in, it will tell you whether it's, how strong it is and what else you need to do. So that's just a reminder that the password reset option is there for you if you need to do that. Just trying to think if there's anything else I meant to talk to you about. Deleting accounts, I mentioned before, you just search for them and then you've got the little delete account button, which you can click on and it will ask you to confirm if that's what you want to do. But I think that is a kind of very quick overview of the sorts of things that you would be asked to do. So the bulk upload is the main thing, password resets, requests about moving accounts, and deleting them if you need to delete them. I think that is everything. So I don't know if there are questions, Isla, that you want to round up.
Thank you, Fran. That was really comprehensive and a good introduction. It's fairly straightforward. It's all pretty straightforward. It's just the going through the steps and getting familiar with the interface. I think that's half the battle that I've discovered about it. It's just going through the steps and having a little play. There aren't questions yet, but I've encouraged them to test Fran. So hopefully there'll be some questions coming from previous sessions and from questions that were sent through ahead of the session itself. Can you talk a little bit about e-learning for healthcare? Because that often causes confusion about how to link it with NHS OpenAthens if it's necessary. People often want OpenAthens to access e-learning for healthcare. Talk to us a little bit about your favourite thing, which is e-learning for healthcare.
It is indeed my favourite thing. Thank you, Isla. Yeah, e-learning for healthcare, it became a problem for us when they were looking for a way to have some eligibility criteria, and people other than me went, oh, we have eligibility criteria for what counts as an NHS OpenAthens account, and so they adopted them, and at the same time adopted being able to use your OpenAthens account to access e-learning for healthcare, which in theory is great, but in practice has caused us a number of headaches. As Isla said, lots of people want their OpenAthens account, their NHS Open accounts, to access e-learning for healthcare. There are a number of courses on e-learning for healthcare that are freely available to anybody. You don't have to have an account to access them. Most of their courses, you do need an account to access them. Some of them are free, so you can create an account on e-learning for healthcare and you don't have to pay for them. And then more of them are kind of a subscription-based thing. So you're entitled to use them if you are a member of the NHS or NHS affiliated, and therefore your OpenAthens account is a good way of proving that you are eligible to access those resources, which is why we use them. So if you are eligible, it's a good idea to have an OpenAthens account, because that means you can go through to e-learning for healthcare and access everything that is available to you without having to ask questions and register and kind of go through their processes. Once you have, so what you need to do is create an OpenAthens account, and then once you have that OpenAthens account, you go to the e-learning for healthcare portal and you use this OpenAthens bit here and you sign in with OpenAthens. First time you do that, it asks you to put your OpenAthens account in, and then it asks you for some more details. So this is picked mine up because I'm already logged in, and it asks you to input some information and pick up some details. That then creates an account on the e-learning for health website that then your OpenAthens account is linked to. So excuse me, it's a couple of steps to do it the first time, and then once you've done that, you should then just be able to go to e-learning for healthcare, put in your OpenAthens account, and it will log you in and pick up your record from within the e-learning for healthcare site. We have been asked before, if somebody's OpenAthens account is deleted, does that mean they can't ever get to their e-learning for healthcare record? And the answer to that is they should be able to access. So even if they no longer have their OpenAthens account details, their e-learning for healthcare records should still be within the e-learning for healthcare site. So they need to go to the e-learning for healthcare support and say, I used to access with my OpenAthens account, my OpenAthens account is done. They should be able to give them some details, and they should be able to access it. Unfortunately, even though e-learning for healthcare is part of the same organisation that we are, it's two separate support desks, two separate teams of people doing things. So we can't answer queries about getting into e-learning for healthcare other than checking that OpenAthens accounts are valid and up and running. They will have to go to the e-learning for healthcare site and ask them for support with doing that. Does that answer your question, Isla? Does that make that clear?
Yeah, it just gives a little bit more flesh to the bones of how do these two things connect, and explains it a little bit. So thank you for that. I do have a quick guide that
one of our administrators, OpenAthens administrators, put together about linking e-learning for healthcare accounts with OpenAthens accounts. And I did promise when we did the session on Tuesday that I would have a look at that and see if there's anything I can do to make it clearer for students, and then send that to you. So that's still on my list of things that I will pick up as an action from these sessions. So
fantastic, which is great, obviously, and I'll stick that onto the link to it onto the UHMLG website as well. So it's all in one place, and make sure that the various contact numbers and email addresses and things like that are there as well. So we'll make sure that it's all on the UHMLG website, but you can always contact myself for any questions. But and Fran's often on the receiving end of when I go, but I'll certainly give it a good shot. I'm very happy to walk people through a process as well, if that would be useful, if you're first timers, or if it's that once a year thing. Because it's nothing like a once a year task to disappear from your head, certainly from mine. A question that's come up in the past, and it sort of touches on the resources as well, is about eligibility, whether that's for the cohort of students and the type of course that they're on, is that eligible, or for staff members who are teaching those students who aren't hospital staff or NHS staff who would ultimately have access to NHS OpenAthens through their other hat, their NHS membership. So those two groups of students in terms of their eligibility, and staff members teaching those students. Okay, so in terms of students, I'm just pulling up the actual wording of the criteria that we have here. So this is the one that is relevant to all of you, and this is students from the date of commencement of an education programme which involves practice and placement. Now, we don't actually have a full-on definition of what that involves practice and placement within NHS provider services is in terms of the length. We talk about it being a substantial placement. So if it's just a couple of days here and there, then that doesn't really count. If it's for, weeks at a time, then, or, weeks spread throughout a course, then that is what we would say is a substantive placement. If you're not sure, ask, and we'll talk to you about what that course involves, and see whether that whether a particular course would come under that, would be a reasonable thing for us to agree. But that's often a kind of case by case discussion around setting those up. I know that pharmacy students, now there's been a change, and they now do have placements within NHS provider services. So previously pharmacy courses weren't eligible to be uploaded on as bulk uploads for these accounts, but they are now. So that's one question that's answered around pharmacy students. In terms of lecturers, again, it's a little bit hit and miss. So researchers just working within that aren't on a course that involves a placement aren't eligible. We tend to let, if there's a lecturer or a course tutor who is focusing on information and these are the resources you can access, we tend to let them have a temporary account for while they're doing that. So again, some of those queries are a little bit case by case, and we need to have a look at in more detail at what those people are doing. So generally speaking, if a course tutor is really using kind of information resources and showing them, we'd let them have an account. But other than that, we'd expect that they would just use their university accounts and not need an NHS OpenAthens one. Thank you for that. We've had a question about the 2 expiry dates. Double expiry date is always an interesting one. So thank you for that question. Yes. 2 expiry dates on any single OpenAthens account. Yes, I forgot to mention that. So that was something that I should have mentioned when I was talking about setting up an account. I'm just going to find my account because it makes it a bit easier to go in, and I don't mind my details. I can use mine as well, Fran. It's all right, mine's here now. So when you go into an account, there are 2 expiry dates, you are right, and it's a bit of a legacy thing really. So the eligibility expiry date is on this page here. So that's when you're in an account, it's on the account details page. And the eligibility expiry date is set for general NHS users 2 years from when an account's created. You can set those for, the end of the 3-year course or the 4-year course or whatever you need to do. So you set those, and that's the date on which the account stops being able to access resources. It stops being eligible for resources. It also
as you've rightly pointed out, has an expiry date, and that's the date that the account itself will expire. So you wouldn't be able to log in anywhere. So for instance, on this page, even if your account is the eligibility is expired, you can still log in on this page and see. You just won't be able to click through to any resources. But now I've lost the page. I was like, there we go. It was set up originally to give a bit of leeway between accounts expiring and people being able to renew them. You can still renew an account if the eligibility expiry date's gone, but the account expiry date is still hasn't yet expired. So in that in-between period, a user can still go and renew their account. Once this account expiry date has gone, a user can't do anything with their account and would have to come to an administrator to ask them to do that. The default for NHS accounts is that there's 2 months, 60 days between the eligibility expiry date and the account expiry date, and it is just to give that bit of leeway. We know that people don't use their accounts all the time, even though they get renewal reminders. It's not something, if it's not on the you know, in their mindset, this is what I need to do now, then they often expire. We did, when we did the last contract, we did have a conversation with OpenAthens about the need for those 2 accounts, and in the end it was decided it was easier to keep the setup as it is than make that change. They do have, OpenAthens have since mitigated even further. So even when an account has expired and then has been deleted, so accounts are automatically deleted a certain amount of time after they've been after the accounts have expired, and I can go and show you where that is in a second. Even when an account has been deleted, it still sits in the system for another 30 days and can be recovered. So if I just go into advanced search here and go to just trying to think how to find them. So if I go for I'm just going to do see, there's this deleted tab. So when you get your search results, the results are put either on a personal account, access administrator, and deleted accounts. And from a deleted account, you can actually restore an account from there as well. So once the system has deleted it, they still sit there for another month, and you can go in and restore them if you need to do that. The details of how long an account sits there for are set within, so that was on the preferences tab, and then accounts. I did preference and then account, and they're set here. So for this organisation, those expired accounts are deleted after 30 days, and you can go in and check that. So if I go and change up here to Cambridge University and go to preferences and account, these are deleted after 60 days. So you can set that, and I think it's a kind of, you know your users, are they likely to come back within a month or 2, and other than that, is it okay for them to have gone altogether? But that is a setting that you can change if you want to. So that's why there's two expiry dates. If you renew an account manually for somebody, you need to make sure you renew both those both those dates. Oh, that's weird. Put in the wrong number. I found somebody else's account entirely. There we go. So if you're renewing an account manually for somebody, you need to make sure you change the account on the account tab, the eligibility expiry date, and then make sure that on the password tab, that expiry date is longer, or the same or longer as the other one. If you only change this one and don't change this one, they still can't log into anything. So you do have to remember to do both the dates. It's a bit of a fiddle. It has historical reasons for being there.
That's great. No other questions have come through. As I say, I'm going to put together the questions that came through on Tuesday, where you've answered and addressed a lot of them, but I'll put them in a little list. I answered the questions that have come through from today. And I'm going to say a huge thank you, Fran. That, as I say, that gave a really good overview. Lots of the functionality. As I say, it's pretty straightforward. It's just getting familiar with the process and the steps. We've got a guide on the UHMLG website, so feel free to look at that. I will be updating it just to make sure that it's refreshed according to the current situation as it stands today. And we'll, as anyone works through this process for their HEI for the first time or for the first time since last year, give me a shout at any point and I'll be happy to work through that particular process. But what I'm going to do now is say a huge thank you to Fran. I'm going to pause the recording and before we move on to the next section. So thanks again, Fran. So welcome back. We're having part 2 of this session this Thursday morning about HEI OpenAthens, and it's all about the resources, that password that you've just created for your cohort of students. What resources can they actually get access to? Alan Fricker, ex of an HEI himself and now pure NHS England, is going to be talking us through this. So without further ado, again, because we're recording, put all your questions, either save them up to the end or put them in the chat as Alan's talking, and we'll make sure that they're covered. I'll be putting together an FAQ that will hopefully address some of these and updating the guide so that it's as hot off the press as it can possibly be, so that you've got all the information in one place as well on the UHMLG website. So as I say, gather up your questions, hold on to your hats. Thanks very much, Alan.
Thanks, Isla. So I'm going to just share my screen now. So bear with me for a second. Oh, need to push another button. So hopefully people are seeing that okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
Fab. All right. So where am I looking? I'm looking in the wrong place.
You've just, yeah, that's the one.
Okay, cool.
Good.
All right. Sorry, I've obviously done something differently this time than I did on Tuesday, so it's not working quite the same way. So very glad to do this. As Isla said, yes, I've kind of I was in the NHS for a long while, and then I was in the NHS, but in a higher education institution for a long while, and now I'm back in the NHS again. I look after the Knowledge and Library Hub, which is the discovery tool that's rolled out across the NHS in England, and I'm going to talk about that along the way, because that's one of the things that's possible with OpenAthens. So this is the bit that you've already had this morning from Fran, really. So it's these 2 different kinds. I kind of re-put it here because when I was first doing this presentation, I wasn't going to be there for Fran's bit. I needed to be sure, but also actually because it's really important for this presentation, because it's this split between the 2 different kinds of OpenAthens login that the students can receive. Well, maybe I'll call it the HEI issued and placement issued. So that's a way to differentiate them. We're going to talk a bit about this, but you've got there, a very basic run through of the kinds of things that Fran has been saying and how that impacts in terms of their resources around both the duration, but also about the materials and systems that they have access to. It's important to note here we're just in the process getting to the hot bit of re-procurement of the national content, and we do expect that there will be some changes. There's been a number of changes over the period that the core content has been running, and there's likely to be some changes in this particular thing. It's be a real surprise if there was none at all. But what's going to happen is we'll know the situation before, gosh, I don't know, sometime in October-ish, I think, or certainly before Christmas we'll know, and there'll be plenty of lead time before the changes will take place next April. So in terms of our HEI issued things, oh, that's better. I was had a toolbar that was across my screen, so that's better now. The first thing is obviously there's a selection of different abstract and indexing databases. These are the kind of base versions rather than any of the kind of shiny versions that include additional full text. And these are available to everybody using whichever OpenAthens they're doing. But so we're going to start in this presentation. I'm going to talk about the ones that you issue first. So the HEI issued ones. So these are duration of their course. The one that might be different is not everybody necessarily has MCare. I certainly know that that was the case, that was one that was relatively unusual, and I think it kind of reflected keenness by them to try and get it established a bit in people's minds as a different possibility for nursing searching. And by all accounts, it's not a bad database. Social policy and practice is one that we've added during the course of this contract. It wasn't there at the start, and that's been trying to better address social care, something that's clearly in our minds that we're much more thinking now NHS and social care in our need to look at our resources. And importantly, once upon a time, these were all delivered through the HDAS, the Healthcare Databases Advanced Search, and that was a big justification for giving your students this this kind of login, because that was an interface made for the NHS that effectively used a kind of federated approach and allowed a form of cross-searching. I don't think we'll call it entirely cross-searching. It's a bit of a sham in some ways, but that went a little while ago. There was a change of plan from NICE, and now your students would be looking at different databases through us, different providers, Ovid, ProQuest and EBSCO, all represented. So we've got 3 different ones. The big one that throws people off is PsycInfo, which is in ProQuest land, not to everybody's delight. So that's the databases. Whoops, gone the wrong way. The next thing we have is around point of care. So nationally, BMJ best practice is the point of care tool for the NHS. In theory, NHS trusts aren't supposed to buy additional point of care tools, certainly not with education funding, but we'll talk about how that pans out a little bit later on. We have added comorbidities. That was something that was added subsequently. It's quite a nice addition to that tool. If you don't have it, it does really extend and make it a more practical and more realistic tool, reflecting where there's differences. So it's these evidence summaries, and it's a really good resource for students. It's felt to be a good one for early career medics, and so it's a gives you an idea that it's something that they're going to be pointed out when they come out the other end, and it's very heavily used and increasingly heavily used. It's been growing and growing and growing, which is great. NICE provide CKS, which is another very good one for your students because of the wide-ranging thing, and that's freely available without a password, but I include it here because I think it's important to think of it as part of that particular world. BNF and BNF for children is more of a difficult thing. We are working with NICE. NICE managed this contract. There was a long contract for this, approaching a decade, I think, and we know the app is a particular concern, and it's a concern of ours. We've been trying to get some clarity on it. The eligibility criteria that you were discussing with Fran just now actually are also included in the app's terms and conditions, which is in direct contradiction to what we've been hearing from the publishers about how they do or don't want this app to be managed. So what I would say is watch this space. We will continue to try and reach a clear position, even if the clear position is you definitely can't do this or you definitely can do this, because I think at the moment there's too much grey. And the last one there is Trip Pro. So Trip Pro is a kind of value-added version of Trip. For those of you that haven't met it, Trip is a really neat tool that allows you to rapidly search across evidence. It's really good for guidance, really good for finding guidance from all around the world. And it includes levels of evidence. So it's a good thing. Trip Pro adds more links to systematic reviews and a bunch of other stuff. It also allows you to kind of tie in link resolvers and what have you. You can have that as part of our contract. Not everybody was set up. If you have a go and you find that your university is not set up, then if you contact our service desk, we can give John a nudge over at Trip and get that working for your students as well. So a nice thing. E-journals wise, it's relatively small. There's a collection of BMJ journals, not all of the titles because those have changed over time, but the major BMJ journals, the big ones, are represented in that collection with a long run and full current content, which is great. After that, we have some aggregated collections and some published collections. So we have a Via EBSCO, we have their psychology and behavioural sciences collection, and also a publisher collection in psych articles. And then through ProQuest, we have the Health Research Premium Collection, which is a very wide-ranging collection of all sorts of marvellous and not so marvellous titles. In some cases, or in many cases, for the particularly interesting things, there may be an embargo. So, for example, Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine are both in there, but embargoed. You're likely to have those things anyway, but there are all sorts of weird and wonderful things that you might not have, so it can be handy. And there's a few bits and bobs from where we used to have some AMA subscriptions nationally as well. Systems-wise now, so I mentioned the Knowledge and Library Hub. So the aim here is that this is a kind of national model with a discovery portal, and we have a generic version that people on the student OpenAthens will get. So this is the ones that you issue. There's a promotional URL that takes them straight there. Unfortunately, as it currently stands, EBSCO creates a dynamic URL, so it's not easy to give you a direct bookmark that goes onto it. But equally, if they went through the national version, if they went to library.nhs.uk, if they log in with their OpenAthens, it takes them to the right version for them. Things that you'll see on there, there's Browse Journals, which is our link to Browsine. So we have a national subscription to Browsine, not to the app version for those of you that know that product, but Browsine provides a very pleasant reading experience online. It's a kind of A to Z type model, slightly less nerdy than perhaps the A to Zs that we like as librarians. And it also links through to Libkey Nomad, so that they can have a Libkey Nomad that works against the titles that I've mentioned there. So it's a kind of partial picture, but quite interesting. Bottom right hand corner, you can see the placard that we've had created recently for BMJ best practice. So if the students are searching in this tool and there's a relevant BMJ best practice topic, they're going to get that popped up at the top of their results with some suggestions of what it is they might potentially want to look at. So that's a really handy and neat tool. They are able to request support. That's not a kind of full service. Essentially, it's more of a kind of something's broken or I am stuck, and the intention would be that we would bounce it onto you. We found that's not been working too well, so we're going to be fixing that, or we are fixing that. And the last thing to say is the hub would allow document supply normally, but because this is a generic one for all of the students across the UK, across England, who have a relevant login, there's no document supply because who would be doing those things? Not us, and no one I'd suspect is going to volunteer from yourselves either. The other big thing is e-learning for healthcare. So Fran already mentioned this. I don't need to do a lot of talk for those who kind of joined late. There are specific modules created by us. You don't have to have an OpenAthens, but it helps because you can track your progress and all the rest of it. The ones I've picked out here are searching the literature, but we've also recently launched critical appraising the evidence base, which is a really nice module. Actually, it's really good. I'd highly recommend it. Takes a lot of time making these things, so there's no reason for you guys to reinvent the wheel on this. I know it's increasingly popular as part of courses to have elements of this, but there's also things around knowledge management, around KM. There are specifically also modules that are used as part of students' courses, and that might be the big reason why you'd get asked about this, particularly to bulk upload people. There would be things, I recall doing things around neonatal nursing, for example, where there was a specific module that you couldn't get into without OpenAthens. So that would be a driver for that. So having said all of that, we can then talk about the placement issues. So these are the ones that your students will get when they're out and about in hospitals or the community or NHS organisations. What there are some additional resources that are purchased nationally. So these are things that we bought subsequent to the core content, but that we weren't able to add across the student population at that time as well. So you can see those there already. Royal Marsden manual, direct from the publisher. We have a number of Oxford University Press ebooks, particularly the handbooks. There's a collection of about 146 or something handbooks. There is everyone's favourite, core text. So there are some collections in Cortex, not vast, but you know, popular titles, and also some kind of things like well-being and stuff like that. And there's also mostly prescribing guidelines. So those are things that aren't available on the version of OpenAthens that you release, but any version that they get out and about is going to have these things on it as well. After that, it very much depends on what the organization that they're signed up to locally has, and that's going to vary based on the kind of organization it is. So obviously if they're in mental health, community health, acute hospital, but acute hospital with particular specialties, it's going to vary. But what they're often going to find is collection from Mark Allen, so your BJNs, BJM, and so on. A lot of places have a Wiley journal collection of one kind or the other. There's a decent chance they might find a beefed up version of CINAHL or Medline, so that's to say either complete or ultimate more recently. So there's a certain amount of full text hanging off it at the same time. And a lot of places have BMJ case reports, which may be of interest to some students in later years who may have a case report that they're keen to put out there. It's worth saying that I'm saying this off the back of the audit that we do. We do a regular audit where we ask people, what are you buying? So if you ever do get asked about that, please do complete it. It is really important and useful information. Bit further down the list, not so many people will have clinical key money. There may well be a number of places where there's Springer, OUP, Emerald, but all manner of things, right from individual titles through to weird and wonderful collections of e-journals that don't immediately leap to mind. And we can't say for sure what your student will have on that basis. It'll depend on where they are. And anything else that they've got locally. So lots of ebook investment happening across these different suppliers. Again, this is kind of, you know, the further down the list you get, the less likely they are to bump into this in their travels. But they also have, some people are still buying other other point of care tools. So Dynamed is the one from EBSCO. It's kind of terser than the kind of BMJ best practice model, but bigger, probably has wider coverage. UpToDate, you may know. UpToDate, beloved of doctors, not beloved of people that have to pay for it, basically. You should be aware when you do buy it, universities pay a lot less than the equivalent NHS organisations. So you may be setting up your students for a lifetime of dependency that we can't manage to give them. There are assorted anatomy resources. The most common is Anatomy TV, and there's also quite a few places will have clinical skills, which is a kind of a different clinical nursing procedures with a kind of like a how-to. If you ever looked at the how-to website, lots of kind of graphic-y pictures explaining how you stick things into people and clean up afterwards, that sort of stuff. So they will have their own version of the hub. So each organization has its own version of the hub. It looks pretty much the same. That's the idea. Most of the buttons will be in the same places, but you'll see that they can add things both as other resources to the clinical decision-making area. If they had additional databases, they could do so. But generally speaking, we're trying to surface those local resources here as well. You'll see this particular instance has the journals A to Z turned on, which is the EBSCO's more kind of classic style journal A to Z type product. It's a choice, people can choose. They've got Ask a Librarian where people can pop the things in and it'll send the search strategy across as well as their kind of question. More and more of these will have the library OPAC integrated. There's a lot of regional LMSs being put together in the NHS at the minute, and those are being integrated with the hub by the end of the year. Probably about 3/4 of the NHS libraries will be running on a regional LMS, and that will be integrated in the hub. So they'll be able to see their local library collection as well as the online materials. And we're also working with various people, again, using a regional type model to incorporate consortia. At the moment, everybody gets the AMBER repository, which is the ambulance trusts ones. So that's available to everybody, reflecting the kind of national interest, and because we had a bit of a try with that in the first instance. But we are working with other areas where there's consortia repositories to see about integrating those materials, because the idea here is we're trying to really give people an NHS world, try and surface things that are important for NHS people, and so your students as they become our future workforce. And we're at the end. You've been enjoying the new NHS England slide set, which includes all of these icons, and I thought these were all quite good. We have thoughts, questions, bright ideas, things you want me to go over again, stuff that's in the chat. There you go. I explained the icons this time. I didn't last time.
Brilliant. Well, you've explained so much, Alan, so thank you very much for all of the stuff. I think the difference between the placement issued sets of resources and how it's a good, but it's a cut down version which all HEIs have access to. I think that distinction is an important one to get our heads around, so that if people hear, oh well, I went on placement in this trust and I got access to, it may not, don't be surprised if it's not part of the HEI version of OpenAthens. But I still find it complements some of the databases that my university gives access to, and still complements some of the e-journals that my university gives access to as well. So there's always benefits in one way or another. There was one question in the chat about statistical resources like SPSS.
Yeah, no, sadly not. It's a real, we were talking about SPSS for our own needs actually the other day. It isn't something, we do have problems where it comes to that, and actually I hadn't thought about that. So there is, because you guys would have it covered off better than us, but there's some RefWorks access, but that's done very much on a by request basis because of the kind of issues around licensing on such a huge scale, particularly things where the interest is much more restricted.